Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. Boys and girls, I got a couple quick things I want to talk at you about, and I ain't got no time for pleasantries. Nah, I'm just kidding. How are you? I'm good too. All right, let's get started. All right, first things first, let me put out the gnarly warning. Today's story is pretty gnarly, and we've talked about some of this stuff before, but I do think it's important to keep talking about it. As a matter of fact, I think it's actually fantastic that this stuff is coming to light, even though this is a terrible, terrible topic. We are on the South Bend Tribune, South Bend being South Bend, Indiana, home of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Hundreds of fetal remains found in Illinois home of former South Bend abortion doctor. And this was from September 14th, the other day. Authorities are investigating the discovery of more than 2,200 medically preserved fetal remains at the home of the late Ulrich George Klopfers, a former South Bend abortion clinic doctor. The attorney for Klopfer's family called authorities on Thursday when family members found 2,246 fetal remains as they went through Klopfer's home in unincorporated Will County, according to the sheriff's office. Klopfer died September 3rd, so he just died really just a handful of days before they discovered this. And this is pretty interesting stuff because these were all medically preserved, meaning that there was a purpose for them. This wasn't just some sort of sick fetish. Well, I suppose it could be. Obviously, it's sick what he's doing. But anyway, very, very strange, and lots of them, which suggests that some kind of bulk operation was going on, right? Sheriff's deputies, crime scene investigators, and the county coroner went to the home, found the remains, and took possession. Will County authorities said there was no evidence that medical procedures were conducted on the property, and the family is cooperating in the investigation. Will County is about 45 miles southwest of Chicago. Klopfer was a longtime doctor at the Woman's Pavilion Clinic in South Bend, where he provided abortions for decades. He also performed abortions at clinics in Gary and Fort Wayne. He was believed to be Indiana's most prolific abortion doctor, with thousands of procedures in multiple counties over several decades. On Friday night, the president of Indiana Right to Life, Mike Fichter, issued a statement saying, "We are horrified and calling for Indiana authorities to help determine whether the fetal remains have any connection to abortion operations in the state." Now it says down here, the Women's Pavilion in South Bend, which opened in 1978, shut down in March 2016, a few months after Klopfer stopped providing abortions there. The Indiana Attorney General's office had previously opened an investigation and brought several allegations, including that Klopfer did not have properly qualified staff for patient sedation. He was also accused of errors on state-mandated terminated pregnancy reports, late submissions on several reports of abortions providing to girls 13 or younger, and having unqualified staff members providing pre-abortion counseling to patients. In 2014, Klopfer was charged in St. Joseph's County with a misdemeanor charge of failure to timely file a public report. He was accused of waiting months to report an abortion he provided to a 13-year-old girl in South Bend. The charge was later dropped after Klopfer completed a pretrial diversion program. Okay, so this is a terrible story. Although, like I said, this is really good news that we're finding out about this, that it's coming to light, because this really exposes the true nature of what's going on with this whole abortion situation. And I think many of you understand what I mean when you are talking about, maybe even to you're debating your friends or your family or whatever about this kind of topic. This has been around forever. And if you just want to talk about the standard talking points, the people who are either pro or against abortion, they're always kind of tend to be the same for the same reasons. And I don't really think no one's ever going to budge with that. So it doesn't matter if you overturn Roe versus Wade one way or another, there will always be that other side that wants to argue against it. But when people really start to see what the true nature of what's going on with these abortions, and what's really happening, and that this isn't really about the woman's right to choose at all. This is about a really extensive problem. This guy was found with more than 2,000 unborn babies. More than 2,000. Now, keep in mind, he stopped doing abortions in 2016. So imagine when he was doing the abortions, how many we never caught. But more importantly, 2 years later, this guy still got them. How does he get them? And they're medically preserved. So this means there's obviously something bigger here. This guy's not just doing this for his love of the woman's right to choose, right? Now, I want to point a couple things out, but first let me take you over here to the Federalist. Fetus collecting abortionist connected to unlicensed abortion facility in Booty Gigs Town. And I know it's Buttigieg, but around here it's Booty Gig. Last week, news broke that family members of the late South Bend, Indiana abortionist Ulrich George Klopfer had unearthed at his home in northern Illinois preserved remains of more than 2,000 unborn babies. This discovery came just months after a federal court injunction allowed the Texas-based abortion chain Whole Women's Health to open a new center without the required state license in this Midwestern town where presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg serves as mayor. These developments raise myriad questions about Buttigieg's support for the Whole Women's Health, which has a history of violating state laws regarding the disposal of fetal remains and had named a former Klopfer colleague as the clinic director in its South Bend, Indiana licensing application. Now, the next paragraph goes on to talk about Klopfer and all his little issues about, being revoked and whatever. We were kind of just talking about that, but I want to talk about this right here. It is unclear how Klopfer preserved the dead babies or whether any of the unborn babies were of a gestational age of 20 weeks or later. Indiana law bans such late abortions, except in cases where necessary to prevent a substantial permanent impairment of the life or physical health of the mother. Abortion apologists are already distancing themselves from the now deceased Klopfer, as they did with Kermit Gosnell, another abortionist with an eerie penchant for collecting body parts from his victims. So this is a little bit of a trend. Yet when the Indiana State Department of Health revoked Klopfer's license in 2016, abortion supporters told a different story. When the Indiana State Department of Health pulled Klopfer's license 3 years ago, the South Bend abortion clinic that he ran since 1978, the Woman's Pavilion, closed its doors. At the time, activists such as pro-choice South Bend director Liam Morley expressed gratitude for the abortions that Dr. Klopfer provided to the community for over 30 years. Klopfer, a doctor of osteopathy, also performed abortions in Gary and Fort Wayne. Okay, so they're showing all this love and support for this guy, but as soon as this guy goes out of business, the whole business goes out of business. So this was putting somebody out of some money, clearly. And like I said, this doesn't seem to be some sort of really human rights issue, does it? This seems to be some sort of cash cow. At the time, Morley, who had worked at Klopfer's South Bend facility, also suggested that a series of law-branded trap laws or targeted regulations against abortion providers by abortion advocates may have led to the revocation of Klopfer's license. Those laws impose staffing requirements or facility modifications that clinics can't afford. We can see some of those replicated in Indiana. Marley told WSBT in South Bend, adding, laws like the waiting laws, 18 hours in Indiana, those cause problems. And I want to interject here. This was kind of part of what we saw with some of the legislation with Planned Parenthood. Part of this defunding that came about with Planned Parenthood also included this stipulation that a lot of their centers had to be separated. And what this really does is it gives these women a little bit time to think about it. And of course, it's a big, big decision when you're making something like that. And we can say what we want about our feelings about abortion, but the fact of the matter is that when you're dealing with some sort of young lady who's going through a lot or whatever, that extra couple days might be a decision between life and death for the baby, right? And that's why it's important. And of course, that's why these abortion advocates want to close that gap. Pro-choice South Bend later proved instrumental to opening the Whole Women's Health abortion facility in South Bend. Okay, so this first place closes down, and now they open this Whole Women's Health abortion facility in South Bend. After Klopfer's abortion facility closed, abortion advocates working under the name Pro-Choice South Bend reached out to the founder and CEO of Whole Women's Health, Amy Hagstrom Miller, to see if she'd be interested in opening a clinic there. According to Rewire, the outgoing director of Pro-Choice South Bend, Jamie Morgan, confirmed the group's decision to approach Whole Women's Health. But later, Morley, who identified herself to the South Bend Tribune as director of the pro-choice South Bend group, maintained that her organization was not directly involved in efforts to launch another clinic. Nonetheless, volunteers with pro-choice South Bend have been working behind the scenes to rally local support. Okay, so they're not officially transferring over there, but it looks like everybody's doing some work over there. Morley appears to have no connection to the now open clinic, though, with a recent Chicago Tribune article identifying Brenda Morgan as the acting clinic manager. Neither Morley nor pro-choice South Bend responded to multiple requests for comment. And here is their application right here. As you can see, clearly there is one, so evidently they tried. The Indiana State Health Department denied Whole Women's Health application for an abortion facility license, finding it had failed to meet state requirements of having a reputable and responsible character, and because it had failed to provide requested information related to other Whole Women's Health clinics. Eventually, the abortion provider decided to circumvent the state regulators and sued in federal court, challenging Indiana's regulations and its denial of a license to operate as an abortion clinic. The Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a temporary injunction allowing Whole Women's Health to open without a license. Okay, so while they've been going back and forth, this place doesn't have a license. Meanwhile, this guy affiliated with it was found with over 2,200 parts in his house. State officials called it deeply troubling for the federal judiciary to authorize an abortion clinic to open without complying with state licensing requirements. A spokesperson for Indiana Attorney General Curtis Hill reacted to the ruling by noting that Indiana will stand strong to protect women and unborn children by ensuring that its duly enacted abortion regulations are properly enforced and defended. Conversely, Mayor Buttigieg, who recently suggested abortions were biblically permissible, I didn't know you were an expert at biblical abortions, until a baby has breathed its first breath, praised the decision. Buttigieg's national press secretary, Chris Meager, told the Chicago Tribune that the mayor is deeply concerned by what he views as a new and extreme assault on Roe v. Wade, and he applauded the South Bend Clinic as providing abortion care where there was an unmet need. Okay, well, that may not age well for you there, Buttigieg. But here's the other half. The other half concerns Buttigieg's outrageous decision to veto a rezoning decision made by the South Bend Common Council that, absent his veto, would have allowed the Women's Care Center, a national pregnancy and family resource center, to open a planned center next door to the abortion facility. The Women's Care Center has previously operated a center mere feet from Klopfer's South Bend facility. In justifying his veto, Buttigieg expressly cited the lobbying by Whole Women's Health, which had written to express the view that they would be harmed by such a rezoning. According to Buttigieg, they cite research indicating that clinics in close proximity to crisis pregnancy centers experience significantly higher rates of violence, threats, and harassment than those not near such a center. Okay, well, that might be a little bit true. However, imagine how many lives are being saved. So evidently, he didn't want to rezone this to allow these other centers to come in and offer a similar service, of course, pro-life. But he was perfectly happy to let Whole Women's go without a license. All right. So this is pretty suspect here. Here we have this doctor that used to work for this center that closed down. And ever since that closed down, the whole staff got shut down. The place got shut down. A lot of the staff transferred over to this Whole Women's Health. Now, this Whole Women's Health is petitioning to do abortions, or at least get this license. Can't seem to get it. Meanwhile, right across the street, this pro-life center is having a hard time getting some zoning. Interesting stuff indeed. Now, I'm over here at their site, thewholewomenshealth.com. Changing the world one woman at a time. Now, I just want to point out a couple of things, and I'm not a big conspiracy theorist per se, but I do find these logos to be pretty fascinating. And as somebody who has spent a lot of time researching human rights organizations, children's organizations, adoption organizations, children's mission organizations, and things like this, women's health organizations, I've researched this really, really extensively, and I always come up with these same kind of red flags. But the first thing I want to start off is on this logo. Now, I will never damn a group just because of their logo, because I don't think that's really fair, but I think there are some things to look out for here. And as you'll see this little spiral here, not completely uncommon. Now, we do know from the FBI's official website that if we see sort of a spiral like that, but in a triangular form, that is a known pedophile symbol. So I'm not really sure about the spiral itself, but I just want to point out that it comes up in a lot of these logos. And now in regards to this person here, for some reason, I just want to point out that all the time I see whenever they draw these people, they always do it with this, I don't know what you call it. It looks like a monkey wrench to me, but it's a body, right? They always do it with this same similar fashion. I'm not really sure if there's any meaning there, but I just want to point it out for those of you who do pay attention to the logos, because they do mean something. And it is important to notice. You're also going to always, a lot of times, see a couple hands held together, maybe a heart inside. There's a lot of recurring themes that go into these logos, and I just want to point that out. But this is Whole Women's Health. I don't want to get way into them, but I do want to take you here. This seems to be the one they're talking about here, which is 3511 Lincoln Way West, South Bend, Indiana. And here it is. It's pinged in red here, 3511 Lincoln Way West. And I've got this across the street. It looks like it's underneath all these foliage here. This 3530 Lincoln Way West is this woman's health care center. So they're literally right across the street, and that's how close they actually are. But I do want to point out this location because I noticed a few things in regards to this location. I just want to show you a few things that are in the area and let you decide for yourself. But in order to get some context for where I'm going with this, I highly suggest checking out my previous video entitled Infinite Chan Impossible Food. Now, particularly in that video, we were talking about a group called Impossible Food. They make this sort of meatless burger, including the Impossible Whopper over there at Burger King. And all sorts of stuff. Now, I'm not directly implying that they are involved in any kind of baby trade or whatever, but we were just talking about some things that were curious in their perimeter too. But we were talking about Planned Parenthood, and we were talking about a group called STEM Express. STEM Express is a stem cell procurement agency. And they had actually been caught procuring baby parts. And we know this because a whistleblower who was working at a FedEx shipping center basically caught them. And it looked like that it had been going on for quite some time. Now, I'm not exactly sure as to what level the FedEx has with all of this, but I do want to point out that they had shipping centers, not receiving centers, shipping centers with the trucks and whatnot located next to both Impossible Labs. And I show you that in the video. So please go check that out because that's what we're talking about. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because here we have this Klopfer fella who was just caught with over 2,000 preserved body parts. And he was 2 years out of business already. So what was he doing it for? What was he procuring it for? So here we are back on the Googly map. And on the left side of your map, you can see ping there is 3511 Lincoln Way West. And that is the Whole Women's Healthcare Center. And then over here on the right, I've got Planned Parenthood, which is the Mishawaka Health Center. And as you can see, it's only about 7 miles. It's 7 miles if you take Corby Boulevard. But if you want to spare a little traffic, you go McKinley Avenue and Lincoln Way. Anyway, you can see that it's a very, very close proximity, and that should mean something. Now, I've got the map readjusted here. Right in the center there where the red ping is, that is your Whole Women's Health Center, and of course, the Women's Care Center is right across the street. Down this way, if you found this way, was the Planned Parenthood. Incidentally, there was another Women's Care Center near there too. It looks like Women's Care Center is on top of it. But I want to point your attention up here, only 1.7 miles away, right next to the airport, is a FedEx shipping center. I know, and they got trucks and planes, and they're right next to the South Bend Airport and the Greyhound bus station. And incidentally, right over here is Enzyme Research Labs, right next to the International Airport and dangerously close over here to this Whole Woman's Care Center. Now, this Enzyme Research Labs, I don't know much about, but here is their site. It says that their product line includes purified zymogens and active enzymes from human and bovine plasmas, active site blocked enzymes, monoclonal and polyclonal antibodies to clotting factors, ELISA reagents for detection of clotting factors. So it looks like they deal with blood and coagulation. Nice! Okay, so there you go. What we do know is that FedEx was caught up with this STEM Express situation. Now, we don't know how deep, and I also want to point out that it was a FedEx employee that blew the whistle on this. So I don't want to give a, kind of this blanket accusation against FedEx, but I do find it very curious that it's, again, not a receiving center, but a shipping center found right near this center where this guy was working who just got caught. Actually, he was dead and then got caught with over 2,000, baby parts. This was a very similar thing to the STEM Express situation. So is there connections to that, Planned Parenthood and FedEx? Don't really know. If you haven't seen the previous video, you'll understand those connections, or at least why we think this is a little suspect. But clearly this guy was up to something. He was keeping these parts around for something. He was procuring it for something. Where it was going, who knows? But here we are over on the LA Times, which is kind of another dark story. Democratic donor Ed Buck arrested and charged with operating drug house. And I just want to say, especially to my young, particularly black gay friends, if you're listening to the show, look, you do what you do, right? But just stay away from Ed's house. Stay away from Ed's house. His batting average sucks. Prominent Democratic donor and LGBTQ to the third power political activist Ed Buck was arrested Tuesday and charged with operating a drug house, with prosecutors calling him a violent sexual predator who preys on men struggling with addiction and homelessness. Buck was charged with 1 count each of battery causing serious injury, administering methamphetamine, and maintaining a drug house, according to the LA County District Attorney's Office. Buck is accused of injecting a 37-year-old man who overdosed but survived with methamphetamine on September 11th. That latest incident comes after 2 men were found dead in his Laurel Avenue apartment in Hollywood. In both cases, African-American men, Gamel Moore and Timothy Dean, had overdosed on methamphetamine inside. After the first death in 2017, authorities said there was insufficient evidence to file charges, and that's why they didn't get him. But the families were not only charging him with abuse and really essentially murder, but they were charging with human trafficking. There was a lot of accusations of human trafficking. And that's one thing that I notice all these stories keep leaving out when they talk about Ed Buck. If they talk about Ed Buck at all. With this new evidence, I authorized the filing of criminal charges against Ed Buck, LA County District Attorney Jackie Lacey said in a statement, adding that she is deeply concerned for those whose life circumstances make them vulnerable to predators. Prosecutors said Buck lures his victims into his home, baiting them with drugs, money, and shelter. From his home, in a position of power, Buck manipulates his victims into participating in his sexual fetishes. Prosecutors wrote in court papers. These fetishes include supplying and personally administering dangerously large doses of narcotics to his victims. Not deterred by the senseless deaths of Moore and Dean, the defendant nearly killed a 3rd victim last week. Okay, so this is pretty wild because this guy's been doing this before, right? And we already know he's suspect, but there was insufficient evidence. And like I said, implications of human trafficking. So I have a feeling this might be more than it seems. Seems like this guy just can't help himself. Buck is due in court on Wednesday for his arraignment. Prosecutors are asking that his bail be set at $4 million. If convicted as charged, he faces up to 5 years and 8 months in state prison. Okay, well, let's hope he does go away, but really what I'm really hoping is that this leads to something else. And I do think that this has something to do with the Hollywood machine. And I'll give you some more information on that in a later date, hopefully when I can drum up some more information. But I have a feeling we have not heard the last from this Ed Buck situation. I have a feeling this is more than just some former model pervert that likes young gay black men and likes to get high with them. I think there's something much, much more to this. But like I said, hopefully there will be some more to come. But for now, that's all I got for you. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that. I greatly appreciate it. If you're new to my channel, please understand that you're going to get unclicked and unnotified, and it's difficult to find my videos. So I highly suggest that once you get to my page, that you bookmark it so that you can keep coming back and finding it. If you go into the video section here, you should be able to find everything. If you want to find quick burns and stuff like that, I highly suggest just going to the playlist. You can separate the QAnon stuff from the burns to the daily updates and things like that. So there you go. All my alternate links are down below. Gab, BitChute, Brighteon.com, DropSpace, all that stuff is down below. And of course, I'm at Twitter at IPOT1776. That's at IPOT1776. If you're on Gab, please join me over there. I just created a new account. That's also IPOT1776. Those links are down below. If you have information for me, please email me. That is also down below. Please do not DM me on Twitter. I don't check them, so it's not going to help you. Just email me, please. And that's down below. My P.O. box is down below if you want to send something old school. And if you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon is linked down below So those are all linked down below in the video description. And until next time, this is Sir Patrick Mack. Stay safe.